I'll call the Merrimack School Budget Committee meeting of January 31st to order and ask everyone if they will rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I am reminded that while the pledge is all-encompassing, and we say it quite frequently, it's up to us to remember that the issues and character of the pledge are something that is in our hands and very often seems to be slipping our grasp on occasion. I am a veteran of the United States Navy, a combat veteran of the war in Vietnam. I know what it's like to serve. I'd like to think that I have been a dedicated servant to my country, as I'm sure so many of us are. But in these days, I think it's important that we be reminded that the pledge is not something that we do in some perfunctory, ritualistic way, but it has actual meaning in our lives. I used to share that with my students when I was teaching school. It's just as important for all of us to remember as well, I think. So welcome, everybody. And if you'll excuse us for a moment, we have to get 2 members online, and then we will begin with public participation.
Your call has... Hello?
Hello, Carol, you're live. This is Jace Pelletier. Are you ready for us to add you into a conference call?
Yeah, I'm fine.
All right. I'm gonna put you on. So we'll give Michelle one more try
Your call has been forwarded.
Hi, Carol, you still with us?
Yes, I am.
Okay, we'll proceed without Michelle. Carol, can you tell us your location, please?
Satellite Beach, Florida.
And are you alone?
My husband's here.
Thank you, Carol.
Mm-hmm.
We will begin with public participation. Is there anyone here from the public that would like to make some comment, ask some questions, or otherwise engage with the Budget Committee? Seeing none, we will close public participation. Excuse me. public participation. We're going to begin our presentations this evening with the high school. So if we could have Mr. Clare and Mr. Zampier and our athletic director come forward. I think that would be very helpful. Mike Susi, by the way. Our liaison team for the high school was Mackenzie Murphy, who is not here this evening, Carol Lang, Naomi Halter, and Ellen Wilson. So Ellen, would you like to introduce the high school subject?
I mean, that's up to you. I can read our budget statement if you'd like. Okay. Good evening, everybody. And I went through this with the school board. I thought I'd read it again. In the Merrimack High School budget for the 2023-24 school year, you will find an overall increase of less than 10% with many level funded line items. The budget also reflects increases and decreases in some line items to categorize expenses into the correct usage lines. Items requested in the English language department, there are increases in the replacement and new text lines in order to purchase books for advanced placement classes, as well as to purchase new text to align with the curriculum across all grades. The software line has a decrease due to not renewing one program. In the music department, is asking for an increase in the replacement equipment line in order to begin replacing the drumline equipment as part of the 5-year plan. The drumline equipment is cobbled together from old equipment, much of which was donated by UNH over 20 years ago. The PE and health department is asking to replace a weight room equipment item for safety purposes. In the science department, the replacement of several biology textbooks. The current books were published in 2008, and many have been lost while in remote and hybrid models of instruction. The software line has decreased as necessary licenses have been purchased in recent years. In the World Language Department, a purchase of ACTFL, Assessment of Performance Toward Proficiency in Language, software and testing. The scores will document students' progress towards benchmark levels and can be used to evaluate the alignment of curricular learning targets with student performance and state and national standards. This program is approved by the state to determine student eligibility for the New Hampshire Seal of Biliteracy on diplomas. And finally, in athletics, the purchase of new away white jerseys. These current jerseys were purchased in 2016 and are beyond cleaning. So that's our budget statement for this year. Thank you.
Except for Carol's going to clean the jerseys now, she told me. She really did.
Ellen, can you
Can you hear it? Oh, I said Carol told us how to clean the jerseys and volunteered to wash them, right, Carol?
Not quite.
All right. So first of all, I want to thank Mr. Clare, Mr. Z, and Mrs. Hanlon. They went through line by line, they explained everything, and they were actually wonderful to work with. When I said, I don't know how you do your job, their faces lit up that they actually love it and they love working with the kids. Mr. Z cleansed the budget this year, so you'll see some changes, but they moved things around to different lines to compensate, and then a common theme was it just wasn't their turn, so some things got cut, and then you see it raised in other sides for textbooks and academic sides and equipment, things like that. A couple of things that are going to jump out to you are the assemblies on page 1. That is level funded, but it's a jump between the previous years, and that's because they hold things like Challenge Day, and Challenge Day was actually $13,000 this year, except for it was unable to be held. So that could be a line item that goes up in the future, so we need to watch out for that. Another increase that you will see is in the talented and gifted. And one thing that jumped out that they discussed is that the high school's talented and gifted program actually provides for additional students, not just those enrolled in the program. So it's more of a broad-based program than it is specific to those students within the program. There was also an increase in the athletic budget. Some of those fees are not able to be budged because it's an increase in official fees that are not mandated by our athletic department. They're mandated by the high school association. We also have about 800 kids participating in the athletic department, 450 to 500 participating in co-curricular activities. And then you'll also see a jump for CTEs. And this one, I keep, because of what I do, it means chronic traumatic encephalopathy in my line of work. But in here, for the high school, it is career technical education. So I'm sorry, I always trip over that and I have to read it. But that is on page 7. And you will see that they have students participating in that. Currently, right now, they have 31 at Alvern, 10 at North, and 16 at South. And they're trying to build up the marketing for that and make it more accessible to students and have more students involved. Mackenzie, I wish she was here because she works on that side with the colleges and getting the high schools out there. So Mr. Claire is trying to get open houses together to introduce kids to that. But that line item went up because of the transportation and the expenses needed to provide that to more of our students. The 3 R's, Mr. Z is very proud of reuse, replace, and repair. So a lot of that will be in the later pages of the budget if anyone had questions about that. So they try to reuse as much, replace only when needed, and repair and reuse things as needed as well. I asked them if they could have, I copied this from Dan, if they could have anything they wanted in their budget if money was no option, and they said a performing arts center. And then they also commented that the library renovation that has already been paid for and accounted in earlier budgets has been a blessing to the school, and that more students than ever are participating in it because they were able to allow personal spaces and more spaces for them to learn and grow and take advantage of the library. Now, before we turn it over to them, because I'm not sure a lot of people know what has gone on within our school district, is that these educators that sit before us and directors of the schools and the departments, they've had to deal with a loss of a student. The student and the staff fallout from that. They've dealt with their own personal issues, and they've also, not only the high school, but the district as a whole, as well as Mastercola, dealt with the loss of a longtime educator and coach. So I just want everyone to take that into account as they speak to these people this evening, and remember that it's been a very hard start of the year, yet they still put their personal lives, they dove into their work lives. That's why we were pushed off to this week, because they had a lot of things to deal with within the school to support our students, the staff, and our district, and they still were able to work on this budget and get it out to us tonight. Thank you.
I'm somewhat new to this process. I vaguely remember last year. Is it question time by all of you?
I think
or-
it is.
Okay.
Questions from the committee? Go ahead. Yeah, sure.
Hello.
Hi.
I was just making sure nobody else had already claimed this particular piece. Within the most recent potential reductions forwarded to us by the school board is the softball dugout. And that is of interest to me that it's on the list. I have some concerns about that, but I'm interested in hearing your thoughts.
So the softball dugout situation is interesting because it comes up every year from our kids and our coaches, and part of that is due to the fact that we do have dugouts for baseball. And so in an effort to be equitable between baseball and softball, we thought it was important to at least explore the opportunity that we might have to put dugouts down at that lower field. It's a little bit challenging just because of the space that we have down there. If you're not familiar with that field, along the third base line, we don't have a ton of space, and beyond the space that we have that's fenced in, there's a big severe drop, right? And so we're really kind of cramped in there. But we do feel that it's important that at some point down the road that the girls have an opportunity to have a dugout like the boys have.
I don't mean to be indelicate by any means, but I have been following the budget for a good many years, and we are always assured that there is equity in the way the school finances are applied to students, gender equity particularly. There are a number of questions that surround equity in general. The most recent presentation that was made to the school board raised some questions, and I'm not sure that the school board actually adjudicated what those issues were, but they nevertheless percolated up to the school board level. And so I think it's incumbent upon us to ask what those equity issues are, that we might provide proper funding to ensure that we do not have Title IX violations, grievances, public outcry, or any of the other things that might come to the school board level and be distracting from the very sober work that they're undertaking. And so I'd like you to be very honest with me about what some of those inequities are that you are aware of.
I'm not aware of any. Are you aware of any, Mr. Moore?
Well, actually, yes, I am. That's why I wanted to have this conversation. Not only me, but the school board itself, as I indicated, left these subjects unadjudicated, and yet they rose to the school board level. In their strategic planning and their goal setting, they were universal and repeatedly so about equity in our school district. Equity, equity, equity. I must have heard it at least a dozen different times from the school board. We have some issues that if I begin to enumerate, I hope you can respond to. We have a hockey team that has to fundraise for ice time, and yet it is a sanctioned school program.
I can tell you that that's not true because we pay for the ice time. It's on the budget. There's a line item for $25,000 for ice time. So I don't know where that information is coming from.
I'm
Ellen?
a hockey mom. The ice time they fundraise for is preseason, non-scholastic time they choose to purchase on their own.
I think that's a distinction without a distinction.
But
This is exactly what I'm talking about.
So let me speak on that part of it.
Well, let me finish, please. I have heard a great deal of edu-speak over the years about things that are happening in our school district. And I want to be very blunt and clear about this. We need to know how to properly fund so that we do not have inequities, we do not have public outcry, we do not have complaints from parents, It's a relatively easy thing to do, and it's a small amount of money for us to consider relative to the good effects that it will promote in the community. And so, as I said, I believe that's a distinction without a distinction, because perception is reality, as you well know. We do not want real inequities. We do not want perceived inequities. And if we can do something as a budget committee to address those issues, it's incumbent upon us in our deliberations to undertake that. I heard a great deal of discussion at the school board level about the delta in various funding being accountable to balls. I found that an inadequate explanation relative to how we build a budget. There's been hat issues about who gets a hat and who doesn't get a hat, and so forth. All of these are unnecessary distractions, as far as I am concerned, that we have not been properly informed of in order to consider appropriate funding. I understand everybody has a very big job in this district, and if you think that I don't appreciate that, you're mistaken. I do. I know how hard you all work, and I know what you get paid, because it's a matter of public record. You take on a relationship with the community for which you are remunerated. And if there is something that we need to do as a community to further support your activities and your professional goals, then it's up to us to consider it. But we can't consider it if we're not told about it. I understand there was at one time a secretary to the athletic director's position. Is that correct?
There was, prior to my time.
Prior to your time.
Correct.
So now I'm wondering why we have eliminated that position, and if in fact the administration thinks that it would be beneficial to have some help in the athletic department.
But I can't speak to that.
Well, you're the athletic director.
Yep. But I don't.
You're part of the administration.
I am, but I don't make those decisions.
Well, you're right. Yeah, we make those decisions here, whether you're funded or not. But somebody has to be straightforward with us about what the situation is. I see our international fudge factor coming to the mic.
Excuse me.
It's always Matt.
Yes, it is. I was here when that position was eliminated. I don't think, Mike, you were even here. I think you were hired and that position was gone. There was a few we've been through, after Joe Raycraft, we chewed through a few athletic directors, and Mike's probably been the longest tenured one that we've had so far. And that was a position that was eliminated. I think it was almost like a 3/4 type position. I don't recall if it was full-time all the time. Eliminated by a previous superintendent, and we've never really had a conversation revolving around, that I recall, in the budget years. Rich, you could be my backup on this, as to adding that back in, considering the increased complexity of what Mr. Susi has to deal with on a day-to-day basis. Back in the day, it was simple. Now it's a little bit more complicated. So it's maybe for a conversation in a future date that we could talk about, but it's something that's not currently in the budget.
We all long for the days when all we had to decide was whether we needed a new fire truck or not.
Exactly.
Are there any other questions from the committee?
I do, Chuck.
Yes, Carol.
Related to the conversation about things such as ice time, do we pay a district to facilitate other sports preseason activities? In other words, are we treating the various sports similarly, there differences?
So thank you for that question, and it gives me the opportunity to make a clarification. By NHIAA bylaws, which is our governing body, we are not permitted to pay for any preseason stuff that our teams do, so we do not. And that's part of the reason why the ice hockey team fundraises for their ice time during the off-season and preseason time. We're not allowed to provide any funding for those activities.
How does that compare to other sports?
It's the same. So other teams will, you know, as far as renting time, it's a little bit different, right? Because hockey is unique in that they don't have a place to do it, right? But you know, our basketball teams will go into fall leagues and things like that. They have to fundraise for those entry fees and things like that because we can't pay for that. So they all do their own types of fundraising for their off-season activities.
Okay, so it sounds like it's at least being done uniformly, regardless of which sport you're looking at.
It is, and like I said, we don't have a choice anyway. It would be a violation of the NHIAA bylaw if we funded it.
It's up to the booster clubs, Carol.
Excuse me?
The booster clubs usually organize those preseason and off-season things.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Well, once again, my position is it's a distinction without a distinction. The NHIAA isn't responsible for the students of Merrimack. If it's a school-sanctioned program and they are in our care, we are the parenti in loci, and they need preseason warm-ups and practice and so forth. The obligation is ours, not the parents. And when this takes place, what we do is we turn our students into constant fundraisers in the community, which usually wind up having an unequal impact on the parents of the school children. They pay taxes like everybody else pays taxes. It's everybody's responsibility. And I'm still very concerned that we are being told there's equity when I believe there's a real question about equity. And I've been asking it for years and pretty much getting the same position, not your job. I think it is the school district's responsibility. And it's not just in regard to hockey. We have co-curricular activities that, quite frankly, don't share equity. Maybe it's a hard thing to define, but ignoring it is, I don't believe, in our best interests. Can you tell me how many or what percentage of our students in sports are male and female?
So it used to be pretty equal, close to 50-50, but since COVID, we've had a pretty drastic decline in participation in our girls' sports. At its height to now, we're probably down 42% on the girls' side alone, 25% overall. So we're down participation numbers across the board. It's probably right now, I would say, 60-40 boys, girls is what I would say. We actually offer a couple of more athletic teams for our girls, but the participation numbers are low. And I think, you know, unfortunately, that might be a trend in our community, because when I speak with the folks at the MYA level, their participation numbers are low too. And so it's trickling to us as well. We're doing everything we can to boost those numbers and encourage kids to play.
Such as what?
Well, it's, you know, our coaches and our booster clubs do a wonderful job trying to get the word out through, you know, email communication, social media, all kinds of different ways. We advertise things here in the building on a constant basis as we're heading into tryout season. We'll be posting information for spring sports in the coming weeks. Spring sports won't start until March 20th, but registrations will start opening up in early February. So we'll start promoting all of those sports to try to get those numbers up. Our coaches run clinics and camps and other things during the summer months, provide opportunities for kids to get better. We're doing everything we can to boost those numbers, but the kids have to come through the door.
Well, the point is the kids do come through the door. It's up to us under Title IX to initiate a plan of action to equalize the sports opportunities.
I'd say the opportunities are equal. We do offer them, and we do promote all of them at the same level.
And yet we don't have equity and participation.
Right, but we can't, there's nothing we can do about that except for what we are doing, which is promoting them.
Well, I believe there is probably more you can do about that. So I'm not satisfied, quite frankly. And that's just my personal opinion. Are there any other questions from the board?
Chuck, I was asked to, Michelle Bronchuk has a handful of questions. Would you like me to read them for her? No?
No, I'm sorry, we can't do that.
Okay.
Michelle was not available when we called, and so we had to move on. And we can't now put her in play.
Thank you. That's what I wanted to check first.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes, Gina.
Hi, good evening. Thank you for being here tonight. First of all, my condolences for the recent events that have taken place district-wide, but especially events that have particularly affected the high school. Our hearts go out to you and to the high school community and Merrimack community in general. And on that line, just wondering if, and I didn't see anything in here, you know, we talk about social and emotional, and a lot of times we're just talking about, you know, the middle school or the elementary school or, you know, JMUs. Is there any additional funds needed to deal with recent events, like, you know, different maybe programs that you can offer or additional counseling or anything like that that's not in the budget now? Obviously, you couldn't predict this would have happened, but just wondering if you have the sufficient emotional support for the students and, you know, physical services if they need them.
I think we do. We had made a request earlier this year for a school interventionalist that was approved by the board. We have a retiring guidance director that's retiring, and I had put in a request for a guidance position that is full-time year-round. We currently in the process of interviewing for a new position. What is it called? Director of Pathways and ELOs. So that will reach out to a different part of our population. And, you know, anytime, you know, tragedies happen or we need to provide extra support to our staff and students, I put in a request to the district, and they have come through this year for us. So thank you for that question.
Michelle.
Hi.
Hi.
I too thank you for coming in this evening. I just had a question. Ellen referred to some of the stuff that it's not your turn, where you guys are moving some budget items around. Is there anything in particular that rose to the top of, well, we need these science textbooks, but we need the history textbooks before those, so the science can wait? Is there any of those things that you could be a little bit more specific on, that maybe, you know, as we're looking ahead and looking into your future and what your budgets could be in the future?
We are currently working with the central office as part of their budget for professional development, and we will be reviewing and revising all the core content areas over the next couple of years. As part of that review, we will see if there is need to support the new curriculums, whether it's a textbook or software or what have you. So we are quite happy with what we've asked for this year, and we feel we can meet the needs of our students. But don't be surprised if we come forward in future years with textbooks to support those new curriculums.
Thank you. And I also look at, you know, the arts, you know, the music program and chorus and those type of things, right? And a lot of budgets and such, that's the first cut in a line item, right? But do you feel that you have enough to continue, you know, to facilitate that and to, you know, get more members and those type things, because you have enough support from the district to make sure that you're able to support the arts and not just, nothing against sports. I'm equal opportunity on both sides, but sometimes that's the first, you know, your band and your marching band and the uniforms and all the things that they need get cut first, you know, if there's a place that needs to be cut.
I can only speak for the last year and a half. There hasn't been any cuts, and the message we try to give all of our staff is if you don't ask, you won't get. So we encourage them to take a look at what they have in place for students, and if they feel like they need something, please put it in your budget, and we will, you know, advocate for it. Okay. As a matter of fact, we had we have a school improvement budget, and we used that budget this year to purchase a new screen in our little theater because it was held together by tape, and update our audio and visual equipment. So in some years we have to use that for our NEASC visit. And other years, like this year, I just went to Matt and said, "Hey, this is what we need. This is in the budget to improve the school." He approved it, and we're going to continue to do that moving forward.
Okay. Thank you.
Lee.
As we've all mentioned here, our deepest condolences to the families, the friends, the staff. My family is familiar with that family, and what we've heard and seen in the public as a reaction from the high school is just commendable on all levels. So thank you all for what you've done in the community to help us all. To the performing arts question that was asked earlier regarding a performing arts center, I'd like to know if it has been talked about as a part of this larger program, future program redesign of the high school, or if that's just something that hasn't been talked about at all.
I wouldn't qualify it as a formal conversation, but I mean, we have bent Matt's ear with the capital improvement project coming up. Yeah.
Yeah, I think you have, Steve. As part of the master plan, which we've been chugging away at for the last 3 years, that was delayed by COVID and everything like that. And, we've had Keach working on that for quite some time yet. Tom and I are going to have a final meeting with him. Hopefully we'll put together some numbers. But that's not really part of it, but there's been a buzz. There's been a little bit of a groundswell of sort of people other than us thinking about it or us talking about it, like you, Lee, bringing it up. And it's something that definitely I feel is exceedingly worthwhile for this community. I think it would be an asset for this community. I think it would be something that would bring together everybody in this community. And I think it'd be a little jewel that would shine a light on Merrimack High School as being one of the best high schools in the state, which is why we're all here. And it's something that we're going to look for in the future, but it hasn't been in the capital improvement plan in the past. The central office has been in the capital improvement plan for the past 35 years. And so why don't we just move ahead with the Performing Arts Center, and let's forget the central office, and we'll just put up a couple of trailers in front of the greenhouse, and we'll just call it a day, So it's something important. I think it's something important for the kids, the community, and everything like that. So we have been talking about it, but not a public discussion that the board has had with a lot of, emphasis behind it yet. But the seed is planted, it's germinating right now. So we'll see.
Thank you very much, Matt.
I'm sure we'd all love to hear more about that, Matt.
What? Say-
Thank you.
Hold on, I've got a question. So yeah, Matt, thank you. So with this discussion, and I know you just said it hasn't, this is now the seed's been planted.
Yeah.
Maybe something to think about too is, can we make it a cooperative effort? I don't know how that would work with the town, but something more than, I think so, like you said, so many people could get uses out of it that maybe there's more of a collaborative approach that it could get done maybe in a quicker fashion than putting it in a capital improvement plan and it, keeps getting moved. So maybe just, again.
Yeah,
think
we
about-
could first put it on the capital improvement plan because it would be a town facility that they would use, correct? We could make a phone call, Bill or myself or whoever could make a phone call to Paul McCallie to kind of get the ball rolling and see how they feel about it. And I think we have connections on the town council, maybe. And we could kind of start the conversation rolling. Could be a joint project. That's a very good idea. I appreciate that.
Yeah, thanks, Matt.
Yeah.
Matt, I want you to know that there are some of us who have been discussing putting $100 in a line item for an SAU building and a performing arts center and to highlight all the things that we really should be undertaking and pre-planning for and reserving capital for and so forth. Largely speaking, the budget seems to go from year to year without anybody really thinking about what should be on our horizon as a larger vision for the community. But I wanted you to know that we might have that show of support by simply putting a few dollars in the budget to recognize that these things are important.
Yeah, that would be fine with me. We've fallen away in the last few years, 10 years perhaps, about funding capital reserve accounts. The town of Merrimack does a wicked, geez, Matt, a really good job of funding capital reserve accounts. And we haven't really been doing much of that because we've been kind of playing catch up with the asbestos floor tiles that Tom and I were married to for a good 15 years together. And then the roofing projects and everything like that. So maybe you can start off small with something like that to build awareness so you can put money in the budget that highlights it as a line item. And then, we can start the ball rolling. You got to start small and you have to start the conversation early before you can even think about presenting anything to the voters. You have to build awareness and build a need kind of from within your own community.
Of course, our responsibility is solely financial. It's our job to make sure there's a prudent budget.
Yes.
All the things that we might like to dive into relative to issues are not our purview. But we want to make sure that there's enough money in our proposed budget that calms all the waters and provides for a prudent expenditure.
Absolutely. Thank you.
And we really appreciate your help, Matt.
Okay. Thank you very much. I appreciate you guys.
Any other
Chuck,
questions?
may I say something?
Yeah, you certainly may, Carol.
Okay. I was just going to ask, I guess it would be Matt, but whoever wants to answer, would it be prudent to at least discuss the concept of a performing arts center at some future date, but to discuss it with Steve Keach so that he could look at his design and see if there's any space available where such a center could be built somewhere down the road?
Carol, are you on the school board or the budget committee?
I think you know the answer to that one.
Any other? Yes, Naomi.
As a representative from the school board, I'd like to say a little bit about the kind of discussions the school board's had in the past year. And, Ken Martin particularly has been, every time there's been an opportunity to talk about future planning, he's been saying, we need a performing arts center. Why doesn't Merrimack have a performing arts center? So it is something that's on our radar. The past year, I think everybody knows we had a goals setting meeting, and it was kind of the first one that really, in my knowledge, and I'm really new, we had ever done. And our kind of thought going into this budget year and with capital improvements and that sort of thing is that right now we're really focused on academic recovery and building a really strong community with respect to our staff and our students and making sure that everyone is taken care of for the staff in terms of the culture in which they work and their compensation, and to make it an attractive district to be in, and then for the students to make sure that we're offering all of the right programs to get them where they need to be academically. And then we're going to continue to do these goal setting meetings every year from here on out, and we're going to start moving into broader topics of, okay, where do we see the district now going forward? And so all of these things you guys are talking about are very much on our radar, and those discussions are happening. I think they're happening slowly, but this, like Matt said, the seeds are definitely, they've been planted, and we're working on it.
Thank you.
Aren't you glad I asked that question now?
What was that?
Oh, I said, aren't you glad I asked that question? 'Cause that was my last question I asked them.
Any other questions from the committee? All right, thank you very much for coming this evening.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate your input.
Have a good evening.
Dave. So next we are going to have a presentation from Food Services. It's nice to see you again.
Very nice to see you all, too. I would like to take a moment just to say thank you for the liaison meeting we had the other day. It was an excellent meeting. And Naomi, I'm not sure if you want to summarize, or do you want me to go for it?
I would be very happy for you to start with that. Thank you.
Sure. All right, so just one thing. Food service in the district, we represent the 6 schools. We're self-supportive, meaning that we do operate on a budget of our own, trying to maintain a balanced budget with federal reimbursements and sales from our lunch program and breakfast programs. I would like to say that the last 3 years have been anything but normal for our budgeting. 2020 was a shortened year because of COVID. Then next year was shortened because of hybrid as far as our operations go. And last year was very nice. It was good because they gave, USDA and the government gave us free meals for all students. So some of those numbers from last year are elevated due to the increased sales that we had and increased purchases that we had to make for those sales. So some of the items that I have coming forward is some of the increased food items and supply items are due to some shortages that we've had. Just getting product into us for last year was very difficult. We've had some issues with packaging, which elevated the cost of our food products because they just couldn't get the items that we needed for the schools. The third item I have was some replacement equipment for Reed's Ferry and Thornton's Ferry. Of course, Reed's Ferry and Thornton's Ferry are satellite operations. We do not have kitchens in there. We do have warming ovens, and those warming ovens have been in service for over 30 years. And at this point, my repairman said it would be best if we went and purchased new items than trying to replace or repair those items from now on. So.
So it was a wonderful meeting. It's always a good meeting to have because it's very different from some of the other liaison. Because of the self-supportive element, it's always interesting to see the ways that balance is being found where the district can offer support versus the places where you do it yourself. I have some highlights of, I think, what we talked about. Please feel free to fill in, either members of the group or otherwise, to that. We talked about the fact that there's been increases in cost across the board in certain ways, similar to what was already mentioned. It has to do with supply chain shortages, it has to do with other market changes that have changed the values or the prices on food items, packaging, and so forth. That said, we continue to be part of buying groups. I'm not sure if it's one group that does multiple things or multiple groups, but either way, yeah, go for it.
Sure. Yeah, we are a member of the New Hampshire Buying Group, currently operating approximately 55 school districts in New Hampshire. And also we have taken some of the northern part of Massachusetts in there too. So the amount of schools that we have helps when we do go out to bid to certain items, giving us the best possible prices available.
And I would be remiss, I did not mention the members of this group, which were Carol, Shane, and Rachel. Thank you. Okay, we talked about the purchase price. This is something that I asked about in terms of whether the prices at the moment cover the cost, the increased cost of the meal. And we're told about a recent small increase that was there, and if other increases are needed, they will be considered. But that said, prices of meals are set by formula to a large extent based on state and federal regulations, along with the many other regulations that you manage to meet in your daily work. We found that the suggestion of warming oven replacements at the 2 elementary schools was both reasonable and necessary. They are older. We had some castle in the cloud building conversations about putting whole kitchens in those buildings, but it was a thought exercise more than anything else, and I think those are much needed. That was all that I had to contribute.
Other committee members?
Yes, I was on the committee. Good to see you again.
Yeah, thanks.
I'd just like to say that, with the Reed's Ferry and Thornton's Ferry not having kitchens, you guys do some logistic magic daily. So just good work. I mean, we went over all the questions. You don't have any crazy costs. You were able to take some small retainage that you were able to keep over in your account, take care of some other problems throughout the year so you don't even have them on the budget, which is great. So great work. Seriously, thank you.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
And any other committee members?
I'm all set.
All right, okay. Thank you very much. And thank you, Dave. Matt?
Very good, thank you. Now time for a nap.
So next up, we have Student Services, Heather Barker. Good evening, Heather.
Good evening, and I've brought along a guest with me. This would be Fern Seiden, our Director of Student Wellness, because our SEL budget sits inside our Student Services budget. So I thought it would be nice for Fern to be included, and it's always nice to have Matt beside me. So good evening, how are you? Okay.
Good, thank you. Naomi, you were the lead liaison?
Would you recognize the other members of the group briefly for me?
That would be Michelle Bronchuk, Gina Groff, and Mackenzie Murphy.
Thank you. Would you like to start? I believe that you had...
Sure.
Yes.
So I'll start with stating, I stated this before here and with our Budget Liaison Committee, that the Student Services Office of Merrimack School District is fully committed to the belief that all students can achieve their maximum potential. Through perseverance and dedication, we fully commit ourselves in our schools to providing the tools knowledge, and compassion to assist our children and youth to achieve this goal. Our mission is to improve the quality of life and education of our children and youth with disabilities and all students. We will do that by creating trusting partnerships with our families, our community, state agencies to develop, communicate, and disseminate the essential skills, knowledge, and values through research-based best practices, teaching, and service. Okay? Our primary responsibility in student service is to ensure that all students with disabilities have available to them a free, appropriate public education that emphasizes the special education and related services that are designed to meet their unique needs and to prepare them for further education, employment, and individual living. Additionally, we are bound to serve that to them in the least restrictive environment. As a result, the accounts of the Department of Student Services, our budget, are child-specific and contain costs for existing students in their current placements with related services, the specialized transportation, and other supplemental aids and supports that are required by state and federal rules. The services and costs, as you know, fluctuate annually and even within a given school year, depending on the needs and numbers of students that we serve. This budget in front of you reflects approximately a 3.5% increase. This is particularly due to the rise in contracted services. We had that again this year that we had last year, a similar increase to meet the mandated individual education plans of our students. This year, we also have an increased cost, so very similar to food services and other departments in the school district, the cost of things are going up. There's a 16% increase in our out-of-district placement costs for next year. And then we have our budgetary expenses related to social emotional learning. We've added a position in the district for alternative pathways to graduation to support children who need a non-traditional approach to how they earn their high school diplomas. We continue to prioritize in our department funds that will enhance the ongoing learning for our parents, our teachers, our paraprofessionals, and other instructional staff. In this budget, we were asked the question by the liaisons, how much of this budget do you have to implement? The answer is all of it. Every single one of those budget lines is a required line in order to meet our obligation for special education. And then additionally, we're able to support other students outside of special education through early intervening services, prevention, and intervention so that we can reduce the number of students that we're serving in our department. All right? And, I'm gonna add one more thing. Historically, this budget was serving students aged 3 through 21. Given our new state law, this budget will serve students aged 3 through 22, and we're prepared to do that with this budget. Thank you.
That change, in case it isn't self-apparent, has to do with whether it was if till 21 included the 21st year or not, and recently the rulings have been in favor of it including the 21st year. That's where that, is that stated correctly?
Yep.
Yes, thank you.
Perfectly.
Thank you. Okay, so we had a wonderful meeting, as it always is. I've had the chance to be on this particular committee before, and it is always a pleasure. We had some conversations that I found particularly both interesting and useful. As was already referenced, we did ask for a breakdown of sorts in the budget in terms of which line items would be required to meet state law and which wouldn't, because there's always this piece when we're talking about student services that so much of it is simply necessary and required, and there's nothing as much to talk about. And received a little bit of a very helpful reorientation and education on that, because it's not a question that can be answered in that form. There are district initiatives, and they are important ones, but the expenditures typically that are supporting those are necessary to meet the needs of students with disabilities and are leveraged to do multiple things. And so it can't be separated that neatly into categories. Some district initiatives that originate in wider need meet the needs of specific mandated services, and vice versa. And so the intertwining is very much to maximize the effects and the benefits to the district across those two categories. We also, it was important to note that Student Services does actively seek out some grants. And so there are things that are happening that are not reflected in this budget because they have some money that comes in from elsewhere to begin or continue certain projects. We talked about out-of-district placements. Out-of-district placements refer to situations where a child's educational needs cannot be met within our current programming, or there's a clear expertise somewhere else that would better meet the need than we can. It's an important thing. It happens. It's expensive. But at the same time, under current both theory and practice, retaining students in the district whenever possible is best both for them and for the community. And so we asked about the numbers historically, and we're very pleased to see that we have shifted over the approximately last 10 years from about 5% of identified students in out-of-district placements to about 2%. And that is a lovely difference to see and to talk about. We noticed that there was an increase in parent training and support funding that would better support district workshops, programming in such areas as executive skills, self-regulation, managing difficult behavior at home, understanding the educational process, other requested topics that are important for parents as they participate in the district with their students. Last but not least, we noticed on this is a page thing, page 22, that the ESOL, English as a Second Language, budget seemed to be lower than its comparative peers in that area. And we were curious and seemed to have agreement that that would benefit from being brought up to parity. And so we wanted to suggest that it be raised from its current $1,000 to $2,100, which would bring it again into that parity. Okay. Those are my thoughts. Others of the committee?
Sure. Good evening, ladies and Matt. Gentlemen, sorry, gentleman. I have had the pleasure of serving on this liaison committee 2 years in a row. It's something that is important to myself, my family, and this community. And, you know, like Naomi was saying, these services are required. They're not a would like to have, they're a must have. And I think, especially since COVID, there's an emphasis on, like you said, prevention and intervention. And again, I just love that saying that Amy did, you know, where right now my kids are in the phase of, you know, learning to read, but if they can't read when they get up to the higher classes, when they have to read to learn, it's just not going to connect. So I think these early interventionalists are a wonderful addition to the staff and as another layer for Title I and IEPs, 504s, the other type of programs that we currently have. But agree with the 2,100 to, at the very least, you know, take you up to, you know, a line item and keep you at parity. But I think the work that both you and Fern are doing are amazing, especially in involving the parents and the community, Fern, with your workshop. So thank you very much for all you do.
Any other committee questions, comments? Rachel.
Thank you, everyone, for presenting. I do have one question, maybe a comment. With the grant money, and this could be applicable to any department, is that ever listed in case, you know, in the instance of just awareness of how much grant money is needed, just for if we never get the grant, you know, the following years, or there's, you know, the grant money runs out, that we, you know, our district wouldn't be able to use that?
So in terms of the student service budget, there are no grants that we're seeking to offset. Everything that's in this budget is here so that we can meet our obligation. So what that grant money, for example, we initially started with grants to fund some of the SEL pieces. One of the questions that was raised was, why was one of the lines doubled? The reason it was doubled was the state had offered competitive grants. Fern wrote one, we received it. That created the exploratory MTSS team across the district 2 years ago. That allowed us to provide parent training and opportunities for book studies and materials and things like that. As that grant's done now, you only have a certain amount of time for grants. So what we're doing is not trying to use grants to do our programming. We're going to do our programming And then when we see a great grant that we're like, oh, that could enhance or improve what those things, that would be great. What's really great about Merrimack is they're committed to providing what children need. Matt?
Thank you. The key takeaway from this is the grants are there to supplement and not supplant general fund expenditures. We have a duty and an obligation to provide FAPE, which is a free and appropriate public education in the least restrictive environment possible, right? And we need to do that in our general fund. We have to do a report every single year that Heather and I have a grand old time working on together. It's called maintenance of effort. And if we still have the same amount of same amount of special needs kids percentage-wise, we should spend more than the previous year because costs are always rising. If we don't have that, then we don't meet maintenance of effort, and the DOE is thinking we're using the grant money to supplant what we should be spending out of the general fund for our own share. So that's why we have to be careful, and that's why we fully fund special ed, and that's why special ed is fully funded in the default budget also. So there's a little fine line you have to walk there, but everything that we do, we do because we need it in here, and the expenditures that we report are the actual expenditures, and it works out that there was one year where we had a little dip because we couldn't hire any paras. That was during the COVID era, and I remember I had to list that as a reason why we didn't meet maintenance of effort that one year, and the Department of Ed accepted that because every other district in the entire state was in the same situation. You know, that's why we had that big surplus, and every other state, every other town, school district had a surplus because of we weren't able to hire paras, but we filled in with contracted services when we could. And the one thing that Heather does really well is, well, a lot of things you do really well, right, Heather? But is going out and bidding out contracted services. That's a real talent. So I just want to say thank you for that.
Thank you.
Thank you for the explanation. Sorry if I didn't catch that nuance before, but I appreciate that to understand that. And if I can, one more question.
Sure.
That's okay. On the 8700 line, the additional equipment, it looks like 2 years ago you had an expenditure of over $100,000, and this year the proposed is at just over $67,000. The items that are listed seem pretty important for kids in the classroom, so just wanted to make sure that you guys have asked for, you know, everything that's truly needed in the classroom setting.
We have. So this budget line is for the student additional equipment. For example, if we need to purchase a particular type of table, chair, assistive technology, anything like that, supporting students, specific student needs. That increase in 21-22, I'm actually thinking about that. I'm trying to remember what we actually did. So we reduced it back down. It's slightly above what it was, but I actually think that had to do with getting all of the devices and one-to-one pieces and the assistive supports for that across the district.
There's a lot of Red Cat devices.
We replaced every single one of them. Right. We used that money to replace those. So this past year in all of the buildings, they have all new, some of them were 20 years old. Tell them what they are. The devices are set up in classrooms. So what's really, I'm gonna say, cool about special education is and this we actually talked about with the liaison group, when we're purchasing certain things that are gonna support a particular student, they are going to potentially benefit lots of other kids, especially when we can keep it in the district. So, for example, rather than sending a student out of district, I look, okay, what do they have in that out of district placement that we could provide here that would allow this student to stay in their local school in their community with their peers and in that general ed setting. Then you bring that support in. That support not only supports that student, but other students. So the Red Cat is a great example of that. So for students with central auditory processing disorders or hearing impairments or things like that, when we put the device, rather than many years ago where it might be on a student and on a teacher, it's now in the classroom. In the environment, it reduces on all of those pieces. It can benefit other students as well. Adults, it's an accommodation we can make for teachers, paraeducators. So this technology and these devices can benefit students with disabilities, students on 504 plans, and ultimately students in general ed who might not end up in special education if we can support them as well.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to make sure that
Sure.
Yeah, it was enough for.
We would ask if we need it. I promised you that. I
Thanks so
assure
much.
you. Yes.
Carol, do you have any questions?
Yeah, just one. The increase in out-of-district placement costs, was that predominantly because they were charging more per student, or did we have an increase in the number of students who needed out-of-district placement?
So Carol, the answer to that is actually that we've actually maintained a low level. So 2% of our population is currently in an out-of-district placement. Okay, that number is right around 20, 21, 22. We actually had a couple students move into the district this year. That could go up a little bit, could go down a little bit. That cost increase in that line is not because we have more students going in, but the cost of the placements themselves have gone up.
Okay, I thought that was true, but I just wanted to verify it. Thank you.
Great question.
Any other questions from the committee? Lee.
With coming out of COVID and the way I process this is that I've seen a lot more and heard a lot more children are in more need of attention, my own kids included. So first of all, I applaud the work that you've done to encompass all of their needs because they have become more in recent years. As we move away from COVID and things have a tendency to return to some form of normalization, what do you predict, or can you predict, may become of some of these services? Will we need less of them in the future? Hopefully, maybe. But I'm just thinking post-COVID with the immediate need that's arisen, what's that look like in the future?
So you're right on in terms of students return to school, right, with gaps in their social emotional wellness, their executive skills, their academic skills, right? They're uneven. They weren't in school full time for a period of time. So we've seen a dramatic increase in referrals into special education. Part of the work that I've been doing over the past several months since Amy has come, partnering with Fern as well, is looking ahead, looking at how do we focus on the general education side, that universal core program for all children, so that we can reduce the costs of special education in the future. So I don't see it so much as we'll be able to reduce the kinds of services and things we're offering, but as we improve the curriculum and instruction and assessment model that Amy Doyle came and spoke to the school board about and to you guys about, and again, I'm sure she'll talk about it tonight, working with Fern on that SEL piece, which really is about self-regulation and being ready and available for learning, feeling safe in that setting so that you can learn, and providing those supports in those settings, in that general ed setting. So where I'm really focusing my energy in terms of supporting our district is those reading interventionists, having supports on the general education side, having that really strong core program that all children can access, that has universal design features in it, that teachers can, they have the capacity and they have the time to do that differentiation, right? That opportunity for what are those targeted interventions we're going to use for social emotional learning, academic learning, behavioral learning, right? How do we build that into this entire system and align it so that we have students coming into special education who are truly educationally disabled, right? Because what you're seeing right now, I think I shared with these guys, it's somewhere around 80, it may even be more, 80 referrals in the first few months of the year. That's very significant. Thus, there was an increase in school psych. I anticipated that a couple of years ago. I think I mentioned it last year to you guys. We added a neuropsych into the cadre of services that we're offering because it's just become incredibly helpful to really figure out what's going on with some students so that we can really tailor that instructional program and what that student needs. Those are some of the things I see us doing, and that person lending that expertise to school-based teams. But as that MTSS system rises up and we have those tiers for all the different things, so your academic response to intervention, your social, emotional, and behavioral responses to intervention, really it's targeted groups and individual services, you'll be able to reduce the number of kids coming in. I'm sure you saw at the school board, I mentioned our fourth grade is at 30% kids identified as educationally disabled. Those are children who came out of the COVID, right? Those were they were first graders and missed that rich opportunity for that foundational reading, writing, language instruction, social, emotional, and behavioral. So you can see that impact. So we are currently hovering around 22%, which is high, really. When I talked to you guys a couple of years ago, when I started here, we were at 17, 18%, which is right around the state average. What we're struggling with in Merrimack is a state and national problem. And it's compounded by issues in actually being able to hire people, whether it's district staff or contracted service providers. There are critical shortages in everything related to special education, so that compounds it. So the other thing I've talked to you guys before at this budget committee, working with Matt and the school board, is whenever we have the opportunity to hire a person in district, even if that role has historically been served through contracted services, I would look to do that so that you have that employee long-term. When you're contracting, people can come and go. They can choose to leave. You know, we're at their whim, so to speak, but we do use the process of sending out an RFP annually and looking at all the people that come back so that we're stewards of the district, so making sure that we're fiscally responsible while meeting our obligation and supporting kids in that prevention and intervention role.
Thank you for that insight. I also applaud your foresight and the work that you're doing to look ahead. I know it's not easy, this challenge that you face with as much as it's increased lately. Thank you.
It's a great team. We have a great team.
Heather, I have to say, as chairman, I'm sure the committee agrees with me wholeheartedly. The body of work that you have produced here in Merrimack is absolutely phenomenal.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for coming.
Can I just ask a quick question, quick clarification?
Oh, sure.
The 80 referrals, is that a referral from a teacher to you, or is that a referral from out of district into the district?
So, no, so that would be internally. Interestingly, it's funny that you say that because we have some great programs in Merrimack. So there have been out of districts, other schools that have reached out, do you have a placement? We have not been able to do that. That would be great down the road to create collaborative. We've talked about that here as well in the past. Critical shortages make that impossible. We want to meet our obligation, take care of our students first. When I speak about referral, I'm speaking about in each school, whether that's in our preschool programs in the MEEP, parents refer their children in, agencies refer kids in through early intervention. In your K-4 program, kids are referred by teachers, by parents, based on how a child is performing compared to the grade level or peers around them. So someone has a question or concern about how a child is performing, they make a referral to special education. There's a whole process that ensues, like within 15 days, a referral disposition meeting needs to be held. And at that time, the team would look at what is the concern, look at data if there's data that's available, and then that team is responsible for making a decision about whether or not you need to move forward with an evaluation to determine whether or not that child may in fact have an educational disability, or can that child needs be met through some type of intervention on the general education side, thus the shoring it up Amy's request for interventionists. We don't currently have those. So really, right now in Merrimack, we talked about this a little bit with the liaisons, special ed in a way is the only game in town, so to speak. So if we can have on the gen ed side some of those supports in place, students could receive those interventions, and they would, so you don't wait for the gap to be so big that a kid is failing so dramatically, but the referrals are made internally at a school level. Yep.
Thank you very much for coming here this evening.
You're welcome. Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Matt, I assume you're going to stay right there for maintenance? Tom, Now here we have a true dynamic duo in the district.
I just want to say, little bit of levity. Tom and I see one another almost, 2-3 times a day, right? A lot. And he usually brings in a piece of paper with some numbers on it. And I've noticed over the years, the smaller the piece of paper that he has, the larger the number is. So the other day he comes in with a little tiny piece of paper. He scared the heck out of me. So anyway, go ahead, Tom.
Okay. I'd like to thank you for letting me present the budget to you tonight. I want to thank my liaisons. I think we had a great meeting. Unlike most of the rest of the district here, I would prefer my liaisons, if you don't mind, to start. So if that's okay with you?
Absolutely. We did you want to?
Oh, Shane, if you just introduce the members of your liaison team.
Absolutely. It was myself, Ellen, Lee, and Carol. And all right, so I didn't know I was doing the intro. Now you got me all.
Oh, I'm sorry.
So I was going to leave the big items for Tom, but the main items this year, we had some district-wide building repair costs. A large line item here is going to be the lease cost for the unit ventilators, and then of course the increase in utility costs is impossible to budget, so we understand that. Some of the things that we talked about, you know, the rubbish cost was extremely low expenditure compared to budget. We talked about that we still have some COVID overlay, and I think that's understood. We continue to go through, obviously you have a couple of large line items in the maintenance and upkeep. I specifically asked about refinishing the gym floors because there were a couple different line items here, and Tom clarified there's a couple different types of refinishing. There's refinishing that is maintenance annually, which is the $31,000 line that you list here for 7 wood gym floors. And then there's a larger maintenance that you're doing at the middle school that is supposed to happen every 10 to 15 years. Floor was put down in 2004. So you have 19 years on that. And at this point, it just needed to be done. So, I mean, I applaud you there. You know, I wrote down a quote, and I'm going to keep going, but Ellen had asked, if you had all the money in the world, you know, what would you do? And Tom said, and I quoted this exactly, anytime we spend money here, it doesn't go to the kids. And I think that speaks volumes about your budget, because we pulled out every item, and, you know, we can keep going through. The plowing contract was a large line item. You know, you send that out every 3 years. We talked about how the master plan may affect that, and you had that in your mind as, yes, we're going to keep that going. There was a large Honeywell contract that jumped out. It was like $414,000. And that was you were really proud of that, because first of all, you got Honeywell to accept that during COVID times with increased costs. So you don't have to deal with that, which is huge now. You had to increase the amount of serviceability in the equipment. You changed the filters 3 times a year as opposed to 2 times, and that was all included in the contract. Me being in that world, that's impressive that you're able to keep that not increased. So, I mean, great job there. We continued to talk about the track refinishing. I think that's been put off so long that if it didn't get done, it would need to be rebuilt completely. So I think, thank you for doing that so that we don't have a major cost there. I think those were the large items, unless I'm
missing anything, or anybody else on the committee you want to take back over, or?
No, I'm fine if you
Yeah.
want to open up.
Yeah, Tom, I think that quote again, anytime we spend money here, it doesn't go to the kids. It spoke volumes. So thank you, Tom.
Thank you.
And just, Tom does a tremendous job in keeping these buildings clean. His maintenance crew, all the custodians do a fantastic job. His assistant facilities director, Mike Dumais, who works second shift, does a fantastic job. These are one of the cleanest sets of buildings that I've ever seen. Every day since I've been here, it's been amazing. So kudos to him for that.
Committee members' questions?
I have something, please.
Yes, Carol.
One is a question, although I was a liaison, I forgot to ask then, so I'll sneak it in now. Since Madeline Bennett Drive became a town road, has that reduced our cost of plowing?
No, because it was always plowed by the town and it still is.
Oh, okay. Well, that answers that. And then my only other thing was, and I bring this up every year, and I just feel obligated to bring it up again this year, that we're spending in this budget approximately $7,900 on utilities for the red building, which is more money down the drain.
Tom, I'd like to tell you what a great beard you have.
Thank you.
And I'm going to ask Matt about the red building and the maintenance budget.
Well, I think last year the Budget Committee put in $10 for the destruction of Brentwood. That's going to be a topic of conversation with the board, or it can be a topic of conversation here. It is in the capital improvement plan, but it is not in the budget at this time. It does seem like we've gotten, well, we've never used this building for anything but a training ground for the police to go in and do what they do with other departments. And to just keep the building, running, it has minimal electricity and water and sprinkler systems and everything like that that have to be maintained. And this is a 10,000 square foot building. When it was fully functional years ago, let's say a decade ago, when Ceresc was in there, and it was around $25,000 worth of utilities back then. So we put it down at its barest minimum. In order to make those utilities zero, what we would have to do is we would have to shut everything off, the gas, the propane, everything, electricity. We would have to go to the fire department. I talked with Mike Curry about this when he was chief a few years ago. I'm assuming the protocol has not changed. We'd have to let him know that it's going to be an abandoned building, and we have to take plywood, just like if Hurricane Sandy were to come through or something like that again, and cover every window, every door, and board the entire thing up. So if it does catch fire, the fire department is assured there is no one inside. So that's how we could make the cost of utilities go away. Or we could take another route and we could start taking the thing apart and bringing it to the Town of Merrimack landfill, utilizing their trucks, and they would charge us $95 a ton to haul the stuff away.
Can I follow up on that, please?
Certainly, Carol.
Do we need to put at least the $10 in this year's budget again, so that if the building doesn't get torn down this year, that next year that $10 will still be a line item in the budget?
Naomi.
It is going to be my suggestion that we fund the full amount necessary to take the building down. I think it's been long enough. Very early in this process, I was one of the proponents of being patient. That was now a number of years ago. And I think that putting $10 in is not much of a statement at this point in time.
Do given that? Do we have a cost estimate of what it would cost to tear it down?
You know, we looked at this so long ago. I put in the capital improvement program, you know, looking at this in the future, knowing that there's asbestos in the basement, knowing that we're going to have to do, it is in the basement, right, Tom?
There's abatements are needed.
Yeah, abatement's needed. And I put it around $350,000 just to make sure we could do what we want to do. Because in the end, what we want to do is have a nice pad site, have it all compacted with clean fill. I don't want to leave chunks of foundation in there and all sorts of stuff. I want it all gone. I want it all clean. So if it ever needed to be a parking lot or whatever it needed to be, that it would, you know, be able to maintain itself with a good solid surface. So that was the number I had.
And I guess the question would be, if the budget committee chose to put that in, whether it would be more appropriate to put it in the general budget or as a warrant article.
You can't put it in a warrant article because the warrant article for that does not exist. Budget committee can't create warrant articles. School board can create warrant articles. Warrant articles can also be created by petition signed off by 25 registered voters. So
that was kind of what I was thinking, was a petition warrant
okay, Carol.
article.
Yeah, okay. That would be an option if you wanted to, or somebody wanted to start one. They can always do that. That's their right as a resident.
On the other hand, if you give the voters a choice and they say no, no means no. You're stuck with it. I think we've already been stuck with it long enough. Any other questions from the committee? Yes, Dan.
Just a statement. When I came in tonight, the lights were on in that red building. There was a police cruiser and 2 cars outside of it, so somebody was using it this evening.
Yes, they are. They did fill out a form. We did get a request from the police department today to use it, so it was being used by them.
Rachel.
I'll just make one comment as well, a statement of gratitude. Thank you so much, Tom, to you and Mike and your team. We can all say, I think we've all said our thanks to every department that comes up here. But the quote that Shane said a couple times, your budget does indirectly impact all the students, right? If we didn't have such the care behind what you do, our facilities would not be in the great shape that they're in, and students wouldn't want to come to school. So we thank you for all of your hard work and everything that you put into this.
Thank you. Lee.
Good to see you again, Tom. I remember being on the liaison committee with you a couple of years ago, and truly appreciate what you do and the minimalist way that you try and keep that budget down. What I'd like to know is what we see in the future. All right, we've got a great budget here this year. What are some of the improvements that you see, not in the too far distant future, that we may be expecting?
When we go to lay out the budget, Matt and I get together, and a lot of items that we have, or I have, I should say, is quite large. So normally we try to lay that out in the SIP. So that's part of the SIP process. The other question that was asked is, what's one thing that you really think that's really needed? I'm a big proponent, as you all know, for roofs, and keeping it up to date and current is the best we can. The other real thing that really sticks out at me now is the O'Hara Road is starting to deteriorate. The front of the high school, I think, can use a redesign, not only to be efficient, but for the safety of the students. Anybody who's been at Merrimack High School at a time when we're dismissing, you could say it's a little chaotic sometimes out there. So I think that's really important, and we are looking forward to the master plan that school board has talked about, and Matt and I and Steve Keach started working on, and I believe that the quicker we can get that process, the better off we would be.
Yeah, right now we're working on, staging, what comes first, what comes second, and Tom and I and Steve are going to have a conversation this week about it. It seems like it's been a laborious process, but we do have a design. We do have all the entire land, the entire area has been surveyed, so we have exact points, and we know where all the utilities are, and we have like a brand new schematic laid out in CAD, and then we have Steve's rendition of what he thinks may or may not help us. We're kind of walking through that. We've been to the Planning and Building Committee with this. We have not been to the board yet, but we want to do a little more kind of enhancements to see if we could make this better. It doesn't, well, there's a few things we just want to revisit and adjust here and there. Yes.
Lee, I have offered in the past something that I think has to be dealt with somewhere in the near future in terms of a large capital outlay, and that is some type of sidewalk plow, blower of a real industrial quality that can help reduce our staff dealing with small snow blowers and a lot of walking and all of those kinds of things. I think there'd be a greater efficiency. Put on a trailer, cart it around to all of the other district buildings and so forth. We have more sidewalk than we've had in the past. More sidewalk coming up in the future, particularly with the relocations of the infrastructure, O'Gara Drive, sidewalks, etc. So I think somewhere in the near future we're going to have to consider that kind of a vehicle purchase for the district. Gina.
Hello. Thanks for coming tonight. I echo Rachel's sentiments that the staff that you have been amazing. Your leadership has been greatly appreciated. I know it's been tough, there's been a shortage of being able to hire people. The staff is always very cordial, and I know being part of the PTTF, we do make a mess with some of our events, and they're always there to help clean up. So thank you for that. I did have one question. So, and this is a little bit selfish because it falls under my realm for PTTF. In maintenance, so before the beginning of every school year, the PTTF will come out and we'll clean up the outside of the buildings. So, right around, I can only speak for my school, right around in that circle. So we'll do, we'll get the mulching. We were fortunate enough to have it donated last year, and we're kind of responsible for all like the weeding and the upkeep just for that particular part. What is the delineation between, like lawn care maintenance for the district versus what, I guess it's not even the school because we do it as the parent-teacher committee? I'm just curious about that, if we've ever thought about including things like that in the budget.
I feel like it's an attorney-client thing going on. I'm sorry for that. I wanted to get my, years ago when we built the middle school, we added how many acres of fields?
I'm not sure.
And land, it's like 10 acres, right?
Right.
And we've added only, I think it was like 10 years after that middle school was built, we added a half grounds position. So we only have a 0.5 extra for all that other land. We have all these fields, we have these grounds that we have to deal with over here. I think we'd like to do a lot more, but we're to the point right now where we're stretched out as far as the number of people who work grounds. Go ahead, Tom.
Especially when we're talking about like cleanup or start of the year, that's when all our sports start. So that takes a lot of effort. We basically not only use the ground staff, but we use the maintenance staff also, as far as to come out and clean, get the fields ready and do that. So it's a really tough time for us. That springtime, everything's starting. We basically cut the grass. We make sure we try to, at the sports fields, we do fertilizing and stuff like that. We work on our irrigation systems. There's really not a lot of extra time that we have as far as do we weed, do we do this, do we do that? And actually, unfortunately, that has been placed a little bit on the schools to upkeep the front of their areas. Again, it's just a time with us. It's a bad time of year for us, and staffing issues for us at that level is just not there.
Completely understandable. My husband jokes that I do more work at the school than on our own yard. We pay someone to come do our own yard, so.
There you go.
But thank you. Again, I understand.
Thanks.
Any other questions? Shane?
Tom, if the fields were turf, would we need to mow them, fertilize them, and water them?
No, but there is other upkeeps that we would have to do.
All right, just check. Thank you. That was somewhat sarcastic with the group.
The artificial surface is not the windfall of a savings in labor that you think it's going to be. Because you have to hire a company to come in, how many times a year? 2, 3, 4 times a year to groom those, you know. We wouldn't want to get a grooming machine and all of a sudden become artificial turf specialists. We would want to sub that out and have the company who did the install do the grooming to maintain the warranty on the turf. So we don't want to go mucking around with that ourselves. At least I don't want to get on one of those machines. You?
And thank you for the clarification. I don't think it's going to be any crazy windfall. I'm trying to understand the total cost, because if you do the maintenance, then you do the field rentals on the previous high school budget. I'm just trying to get it in people's minds.
See, in the past, people have thought, oh, it's an artificial surface. You're done. You're not done.
Yeah, there's rubber that needs to be resurfaced and everything all the time. Yeah. I'm just trying to build up a bigger discussion.
Right, good. I appreciate that.
He wants in like the Performing Arts Center.
Yeah.
I think that's a great idea.
What if we had AstroTurf in the Performing Arts Center?
We do have one artificial surface in the district, you know. No? Does anyone know where it is? It's the courtyard in the middle school. If you ever go in the middle school, right near Family Consumer Science and the tech area, there is a green surface there that stays green all year long because it's an artificial surface. We did that when we built the middle school. It was one of these things that I was talking to the architect, Frank Baronese. I says, I hate courtyards because of the grass and no one mows them and they get lousy. So we decided to experiment with that, and it still looks brand new, so.
And the tables look great there, and they used that courtyard.
Thank you.
For more than cookie storage in November.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes, Rachel.
Thanks. Okay, so with what I just heard was 10 years ago with the addition of the middle school and 10 acres of new land, we only added a half a person. Putting the critical shortage of people aside, let's say people were ready to walk through the door and join your team, how many more staff members would you need to get the job done across the district?
And I hate to be evasive, but it really just depends on what scope we're going to go for. You know, there's a lot of things that we could do, a lot of things we should do. Could we utilize an additional full-time person? Absolutely, we could. But at this point, we don't, but we could.
Yeah. By hearing just a half a person, I mean, I would assume you'd need at least the other half, to get that full-time person. But is it in the range of 1 to 5 people to really help out, or is it more like 1 to 3? And totally understand that scope defines that. But just again, to do what you guys are doing today, and maybe get your next next priority, what would that take? It
would be my approach to take it one step at a time. Probably go to a full-time person, third person, and then we assess it from there. Trying to keep the scope of it can be overwhelming if we started doing everything. So the next step would be going to 3 people full-time.
You know, if all of a sudden we're going to be like, you know, Edward Scissorhands, and we're going to have shrubs that are going to be like shaped like, you know, whatever, you know, that's going to obviously take a lot of labor. But, you know, at least to get from the halftime to the full time, like we had originally kind of talked about years ago, that'd be a big probably plus for us.
Yes.
So it sounds like that could be utilized in the 23 budget then.
Yeah, because what Tom was saying about, you know, the sports fields and everything like that, we get calls. Tom gets a lot of calls. How come the fields are not, how come this, how come that, how come that? So that has to be our first priority. And unfortunately, some of the beautification projects that are done around the buildings, I see what the parent groups does. I mean, it's amazing. But we just can't get to those because we're being pushed in another direction by other forces, so it's tough.
I have another question.
Yes, Carol.
If we eventually do go to artificial turf, what is the life expectancy of a field like that?
It changes because it's different grades, but we would expect around 15 years.
Okay, thank you.
Bedford replaced theirs, right?
Yes.
Yes. Bedford High School, which was put together around 15 years ago, they replaced theirs last year. All of it. So.
Okay.
Any other committee questions? Seeing none, I'd like to thank you very much for coming forward.
Thank you.
It's always good to see you, Tom.
Thank you all.
And I would like to take the opportunity to really put a title to this. This is our technology and library media. And given today's fast-paced change in technology, I assure you if there's anything we can do to help our kids, it rests in technology. And so I would like to welcome Jason Pelletier to present his budget.
Thank you, everybody. It's a pleasure being here. In the tech and library media services budget, we're continuing to support the teaching, learning, and operational functions of the Merrimack School District. In our budget, it really reflects the implementation of the capital improvement plan. That's kind of like the big add on there. And we also want to continue to ensure proper technology replacement cycle. That's part of that. Our budget supports the district's adoption of one-to-one devices for every student. And then we also recognize the ongoing change in the educational landscape, right? We had a large implementation of technology due to remote learning. We have needs to provide engaging learning opportunities that are universally designed at a personalized pace for every learner. And this budget also reflects an ongoing commitment to provide technology, software, and devices, the management that supports that flexibility as well. The two big items in this technology budget are the capital improvement plan, and that's a 6-year cycle for technology, and that's all of the technology. So that's computers, that's switches, that's servers, that's there's iPads for K-1. Some teachers use them as well. There's other infrastructure needs on there. There's classroom equipment like projectors and document cameras and other things that are used every day in the classroom. And we want to have a responsible replacement of that to ensure that the students, teachers have everything that they need to continue to learn, be engaged, enhance curriculum, as well as the other large item that's in there as well as our software line, and that incorporates databases for library, software to also enhance and supplement our curriculum, allow for differentiation. It also allows the business side of things to function better, more efficiently as well, because not only are we do the education and everybody that does it so well here, but we also have to pay people. There's other business sides of things. This whole budget is kind of that business side of things. We have to make sure that that's efficient, that it works. It's always on, just like the technology in the classroom. I had the pleasure of working with the liaison group led by Lee. And if you'd like to, Lee, feel free.
Thank you, Jason. That was well said, and really gave us a very broad scope of exactly what this budget is and what you've done to create and juggle this massive. She referred to it as my baby, and I said, yeah, it's like a baby Huey. It's really kind of large in scale as far as what we're trying to do and moving us forward. I wanted to applaud you on several aspects, many of which you just touched on. Really continuing with that one-to-one computer model for the students. Some of the technology that you've reassessed and reinvested in, taking our security level to an enterprise level really made complete sense to me, being somebody who works in the creative but computer side and understanding that IT is less secure in many more areas, and to make it that more secure for our children and our environment. I mean, we look at some other towns that have been hit with this cybersecurity stuff. It's just debilitating to think what could happen. So I applaud you on your IT efforts in that respect. Much of what we see in the budget, and we talked about this in our liaison. Oh, first I wanted to actually mention our other liaison members, the two Naomis and Dan. Thank you. As I was saying, I kind of lost my train of thought there. You really made an impact on in this budget, really trying to repair as much as we could, but also seeing the need to move forward in certain areas where there wasn't a need to repair or couldn't repair, but really rather replace. And I think the projectors was a big item that you mentioned there. We went through line by line, and it's easy to see where these things add up extremely quickly in the environment that you live in. Much of what we did talk about was replacement of some of these larger scale items, servers, boxes that are kind of multi-use, multi-layer pieces to our technology that have kind of aged out over the years and are now looking at end of life cycle. We talked briefly about the division between technology and library and how they are different, and some of these line items in the budget may need to be rejiggered as we kind of move away from some of the library feature and more into the technology side with some of the software, textbooks and what have you. I think that about sums up what we did. Does anybody have any questions?
I just have a comment. Jason, you came in and talked about the capital improvement plan in the building and planning committee. So we grilled you for what felt like, an hour. We gave you a lot of questions on that. And we talked specifically about finding the right Chromebooks, iPads, whatever it is, to meet the needs of the students as they come in, and it works through their entire career, and then they're actually able to leave with it with just a little bit of life left. So you worked out that technology piece where you don't spend too much on the technology up front, but it gets them way through, through their career wherever they need it, and then they can leave with it to go on, which I thought was great. So I know it doesn't go into detail here, but I think the thought process you put behind that improvement plan was huge.
Thank you.
Michelle.
Hi. Are you also taking into account, we've had, larger conversations with the elementary school, right? Particularly Thornton's Ferry, right? That potentially is going to see a major influx of new students, based on, what's being built and that side of town in Merrimack. So do you also have to kind of foresee what you're going to need for incoming iPads or Chromebooks or what have you, if you're doing a one-for-one ratio?
Yeah, absolutely. So that's a great question, because a lot of this, we know students, they're wonderful, but maybe they don't always take care of things the best sometimes, not all of them, but sometimes. So there's a little bit of a percentage increase, and that is for those breaks that just happen. You have to replace something, and inventory isn't always there, and like models are important to have, and then also to reflect any incoming students or anything like that, and so that they have a similar device to their neighbor next to them in the classroom. So absolutely.
Thank you. Just one more. Do we have extras per se on hand, right? So obviously what we did learn going into COVID, right, was the minute something happened, that supply of things that we need just completely dissipated, right? So if we ever ran into something like that again, or or there's issues with the chip manufacturer and for cars and those type things, do we at least have an acceptable amount that we have on hand that?
So we don't have like a large surplus. We have enough to accommodate some students coming in and obviously those breaks, but we don't have a large surplus. But when those things happen, right, the things are not available. And unfortunately, that's just the world that we live in now. We have numerous vendors to go for and go shopping, for lack of a better term. And I'll hit the ones that I normally know that can get us equipment as quickly as possible. And then they'll give us the lead times on it. And sometimes we are handcuffed, but trying to get ahead of that is really important.
Okay. Last question, I promise. Have you also looked at, and I'm sure you touched upon cybersecurity and those type things, right? The electronic world is definitely changing, and it's changing faster than, we can keep up, right? So are there things do you have enough, do you think, in your budget that's helping you foresee things that you may not necessarily need today, but if stock market blew up tomorrow, for lack of a better, that you would be ready for, or that you would know, yep, I have the money in the budget to do X, Y, and Z, or?
Another great question. In this capital improvement plan is trying to get us there, right? And starting to get us to that point where we can ride the wave if we need to, and we have a solid infrastructure that can last. And so the other thing that's great is, if I do get in a bind, which has happened, I always kind of go over to Matt, and I might not have a piece of paper, but I'll have my laptop in front of me and be like, hey,
bring large pieces
Matt,
of paper.
this is the situation we're in. And then we try to work within whatever constraints that we have.
I just want to, I'm sorry, if you're.
No, I was going to say, Matt, we're going to need to start controlling your checkbook because it appears that when everybody runs out of their own, they just come to you.
Yeah, that's true. What really helped us out in this budget and kind of crystallized the need and make me feel old at the same time was we had a meeting over the summertime with the school board, and I think you were there. Everybody was there. The leadership team was there. Not leadership team, but central office administration. And the school board was going over goals and objectives. And one of the goals and objectives of the school board was to have a complete inventory of every single piece of gear that we had in this district. And so Jason did that. It was amazing that he pulled it all together, right? And then I look at it and going, oh my gosh, I don't want to look at this. I didn't realize we had this much stuff in play. It's amazing. We're like a large enterprise. I know we have 700,000 square feet of buildings, but I didn't realize the magnitude of everything we had. And now Jason's talking about, oh yeah, we need to replace the SAN. And I'm going, SAN? What do you mean the SAN? Storage Area Network, right? It's a big virtualization thing. He knows what it is. I don't really know what it is. And I says, didn't we just do that? And he says, Matt, that was like 8 years ago. I says, wow, are you kidding me? Didn't I say that?
Yeah, you did.
Right, I did. And it's kind of like, time, when you're busy with stuff and time just kind of slips by and you don't realize unless you have somebody fresh coming in, looking at it and then mapping it out for you, doing a complete inventory and a matrix and a replacement plan, what you've missed. There's no reason why we should have a SAN that's 8 years old. I mean, that's a recipe for disaster, basically. But with our backups that we have, that Jason's worked with our vendors, everything is off, a lot of it is off-site backup, Power School, Infinite Visions, a lot of stuff that we have is off-site backup, and we have disaster recovery services for that. So he's done a tremendous effort, and I just didn't realize, you know, how much stuff we did have. You do have a copy of a cut list that I handed out. You see it's around $125,000. I just want to let you know before we even talk about that, we're not going to probably talk about that tonight, but at some point in time you're going to talk about it. I've got around $84,400 of that covered through another funding source that is not coming from the general fund. So whatever is in there, we can reduce that because it's coming from another pot of money via the state of New Hampshire. And I just got that news today, so that's going to help soften the blow here. We'll talk about that later. Go ahead.
Well, the old joke is the reason that we don't have a museum of educational equipment is because we're all still using it.
It used to be that way. When I used to come years ago, you know, it's like the computers are 10 years old. Well, my, you know, 386 Epson Equity 2 is, you know, 12 years old and it still works, you know. It's like, well, no, they don't. They have a shelf life. The complexity of the software and the programs, what we do with them, is running away and really kind of pushing the hardware to be what it is and the obsolete. A regular computer, what's the lifespan of a regular computer you would give to a kid?
I wouldn't go beyond 4 years. Sorry, I wouldn't go beyond 4 years with student going back and forth one-to-one. Those are pretty beat up by the time we see them.
Lee.
Go ahead, Rachel.
I guess one question, you know, as you laid out the plan, and thank you for doing all the inventory, it sounds like there's quite a list of stuff. As you laid out the plan, did you do any kind of analysis, or was it part of it, you know, to get rid of some of this stuff, you know, and kind of go to that virtual world and get as much as we can, you know, for lack of a better term, in the cloud, I guess, right?
Yeah, no, and that's a good question. So some of this, especially when I was putting this together, only like about a year into being here at Merrimack. So there's a couple of things where I'm like, we could definitely reduce here, here, and here. There's some pockets of computers and things, right? But moving to that more virtualizing, less physical boxes is kind of part of it. And typically what happens with these plans is it's kind of laid out with the facts, the current facts right now, right? And usually after the first year of implementing it, usually like within like 8 months, that plan really kind of shifts a lot just because technology changes. But the good news is it usually will shift in a way where it's like, oh, these are being utilized differently, so we need less here, or this new technology came out, so we can go and do more with less. Sometimes technology ends up being more expensive, but a lot of times what it will be is that first cycle is just getting you to that baseline, and then we can go and do a lot more of that. And I guarantee you, as we go through year by year, we will find reductions in the way that people use computers. They'll use them differently, especially with one-to-one and leveraging that more. So there isn't a huge reduction here as far as playing ahead, unless other than like the infrastructure and the server end. But we didn't really touch much of like the classroom end because we really want to kind of see how that's going to shift out.
Okay, thank you. And yeah, I guess I was thinking more server infrastructure, you know, all of that to get everything that we can, you know, virtualized, and, you know, the annual cost of that versus having to replace them and then you wait too long and we've got to go into like recovery mode.
I want to tell you a horror story. The original Power School server, which did all our student information system, all the transcripts, all the grades and everything like that, was in the basement in the back room of the greenhouse. That's where it used to hang out until we finally moved it to where it is now, and you know, totally just changed the whole landscape. But when we first started out, we had each little program had its own little server, so we've combined a lot of stuff and Jason's done a heck of a job in the short time. Well, you've been here for a long time now, haven't you? You can't say you're new anymore, right, Jason?
13 months.
13 months, okay. The 13 months he's been here, he's been fantastic for us.
Well, Lee, go ahead. Well, I was simply going to say that we sincerely believe that he has our confidence.
Thank you, thank you. And we have a lot of staff members that help make all this happen, and are eager and willing and have the best interest as well of the town of Merrimack, the students, and everything like that as well. So we appreciate that.
Much of what you've done, and I'm not sure if this has come across as clearly as I think I would like to, so I'd like to highlight that much of what you've done in this year that you've been here is very foundational to move us to a place, like you said, to be able to now consolidate things and create cost-cutting measures. So I don't think that was really highlighted. You know, yeah, there's an upfront cost here, and that's really the foundation and the base that we're going to build this newer next system on. And with that comes the additional cost. But as we move forward, the cost should come down a little bit. So just an incredible job that you've done to get this foundation built as solidly as you have. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other committee comments?
I have one.
Yes, Carol.
As time goes on, obviously more and more of your budget is aimed towards technology, and that's totally understandable. But are we still maintaining a reasonable amount of plain old books for students to read?
So yeah, so great question, right? Because we have been talking a lot about technology, but this also has the library side, right? And when we were talking about, you know, technology, you know, in library separating, it's just kind of to make it more clear what's going to the library and what's going to technology, right? And not fading out how important it is for students to have books and a place to go and learn and do things differently in an, you know, a less structured environment, right? And to do studying and collaborate with other people and whatnot. So we definitely have taken into account books and making sure that students still have that. I mean, we have the students check out books all the time in the elementary schools. I mean, there's probably not much more things important than sitting down and reading and everything that's happening in those libraries. So we've been taking a good look at that. Like periodicals comes up in conversation, but there's still a very good and high need for those periodicals and that paper and looking at things physically instead of just behind a screen, because, you know, technology is great, but it should also be used responsibly, and paper and books and periodicals and holding things is still an extremely important thing that everybody needs.
That's reassuring to hear. And this is just my own curiosity. Does the high school library still have, at the time I saw it was like a supply closet full of old VHS machines and 8-track machines and you name it?
So there was some interesting things in that closet, Carol, when I first started, but it was in the plan already from the great staff in the libraries and the library assistants. They were already kind of looking like, can we migrate some of this stuff? And you'll see one line in there. I can't remember off the top of my head what exact line it is, but there's still things that we had accessible at one point in time, but haven't been reproduced. So they're looking at digitizing more of that stuff that we just can't get anymore. But there has been a large clean out, and they call it weeding, where they go and they take out a lot of stuff that's not in circulation anymore or not, that isn't relevant. And that back room has cleaned up a lot. They actually, it's really great. Where that probably was when you were there, Carol, is now at the high school is now a makerspace, and all of those other media got moved to another room, and there's just like a lot of like STEM activities and things like that, and it has morphed into more modern modernization of that same type of other material for library and the students.
Okay, good, thank you.
Last call. Seeing none, thank you very much for coming forward.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Jason. Awesome.
Thank you.
You're on, Amy.
First time at the table.
I can't help but think of this as the Trinity.
Well, we welcome the opportunity to speak with you, and I hope, if nothing else, from what you've heard tonight and in previous sessions, I hope you get the sense that we are a school district that is moving forward in a very positive manner. It all begins with people, and we have some of the best you'll find in this profession. So, Naomi, to you, and Shane, and Carol, and Rachel, I don't want to forget you. Thank you for taking the time last week to meet with Matt and Dave and I. And as you know, this district part of the budget is often the component of the budget that we don't have too much discretion over it. A lot of costs for insurances, for collective bargaining matters, for retirement, for workman's compensation, for Social Security, for transportation services. So it's either contractual, collective bargaining, or insurances in nature. Debt service also, which I think Matt has mentioned several times. That bond is retired at the end of the next fiscal year, so that $755,000 won't need to be budgeted, and that's a very positive financial issue. And I will tell you right now, I could not work with two better people than Matt and Amy, and so we are prepared to answer your questions, and if we don't have the answers, we'll be glad to provide them to you at an upcoming meeting.
Naomi.
Nice. I'll add a little bit to that. I wanted to make sure that we spoke about the fact that when we met, we did go through this part of the budget line by line, which was very much appreciated because, as was mentioned, it's a little different in its way, what it covers, what it doesn't, where things fall in relation to each other. So some of the things that we talked about had to do with the proportions of the expenditures, highlighting the fact that since we're a human-driven endeavor, it's not surprising that that's a large piece of it has to do with staffing and things that are related to staffing. We tended to ask clarifying questions about contractual areas as far as we could, what is required, what might be a useful thing to have in the future. Items that support curriculum development, there seems to be some wonderful progress there in terms of software to better measure and understand student progress, and pieces of that sort were part of the conversation. We talked about contracted services, the many roles that they play in the district, from internet service provider to the financial software and human resource type software. We touched on the transportation contract, which is quite favorable at the moment, which was always nice to hear. I asked about ways, in addition to the formal audits, that we pay attention to fiscal prudence, because it can be very difficult, I find, sitting on this body, to know where the space is between nitpicking and asking good questions. It can be a tricky space. So it was interesting to me to ask again in what ways those who run the finances day to day take care in that way. And the response was wonderful. We have quite a robust bidding system that goes for most of the items that are purchased. The goal is to find reasonable and good prices for the quality that we wish. So one doesn't want to underbid and receive poor quality goods, but one wants to pay a fair price for those that one has. And that is ongoing across the district. Those were the main points that I took away. Group members, feel free to join in.
I think, Amy, these two spoke your praise maybe 25 times at that meeting.
Thank you.
Yeah, so it was talking about the iReady program and things like that, and I don't know all the details in that, but great work. I mean, getting it implemented, getting it in the budget, it's not crazy money.
you're going across all the schools, and you have reimbursements for people to learn more about these things. And I just loved it. So great work. Thank you.
Thank you. And I would just add, we're really looking forward to how we can be more responsive to the needs of students. When you implement something like iReady and PSATs, looking at your assessment systems, that is really how you can target your instruction in more meaningful ways. So I would say kudos to the team of people that have just been open to having the conversations. We've used STAR for a long time, and transitioning to something like iReady that has a built-in individualized learning path for all students. So whether you have students that need to fill gaps through intervention, or you have students that need enrichment, it is a tool that we will be able to, I think, leverage in new and exciting ways.
Can I make a point?
Certainly, Carol, go ahead.
One good news thing, this budget is the last year that will contain, between the two items of principal and interest, $793,000 of expenditures on the bond for the middle school, and then after that it will be paid off.
Spoken like a true accountant.
Can't help myself.
God forbid we should have a mortgage on the church. Rachel. Naomi, excuse me.
That's okay. This isn't a question, it's more of a comment. It has a little bit to do with what Naomi was saying about the coming in and looking at a budget and, you know, knowing the difference between what are reasonable questions and what's nitpicking. And one of the things that really struck me when we were doing all of these budget processes with the school board is that we talked to all of the individual departments, and we talked about all of the things that they're adding and the things that they're asking for this year. And what came out, we talked about them all separately, and you sort of think about them separately, but as we asked questions and as we did all the presentations together, what came out was that all of the things they're asking for hang together. They're all part of the overarching plan for the district and the overarching plan to improve student outcomes. There's the iReady, which is going to provide that feedback, but then the one-to-one devices and that part of the capital improvement plan also connects to that, because then the kids who are using these one-to-one devices can do those activities on their computers. And there was the special services department where they were adding the extra teachers in 5th grade, and part of the reason they're adding those extra teachers in 5th grade is because we have that 30% of kids in 4th grade right now who are on IEPs, and those are the ones who are going to be going into 5th grade. And then there's the reading interventionists coming in at the elementary level. And so all of these things that are extra things that people are asking for, they all go together. They're all part of a concerted effort to improve those outcomes and stuff that I was talking about earlier. And it goes to, I think we have a group of people who's really looking at everything as a whole holistically and planning for the future. And I just wanted to make sure that was something that struck me very strongly the last couple of meetings we had, and I wanted to make sure it was something everyone else realized too, is that we're really, it's a good plan we've got right now, and we're really grateful to our staff and our administration for both creating that plan and then presenting it to us and bringing it to us and making us see like how good of a plan it is.
Thank you, Naomi. Is there any other committee comments?
I'll just say thank you. Like everyone else, you guys really broke this down, and I know a lot of my questions, kind of like Naomi hit upon, it's, you know, that nitpicking versus not, but you guys really helped clarify, you know, things that weren't obviously contractual, that stated they were contractual, and a lot of my questions had to do around like that staff development, you know, continuing education. All of that's built into contracts, and our staff members, you know, when we look at our whole benefits package, that is, you know, we offer a good whole benefits package, and that was a lot of what was in here that I had questions on, so thank you.
Any other comments?
Thank you for letting me quote you all the time. You must hear ding, 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 ding when I say that all the time. I was on the interview committee for you, and it's really nice to see that we knew right from the start you'd be a great candidate, and all the great things that you've done so far. I've heard from several people, even among the parents, who think that the programs that you're implementing and are going to implement are going to make a big difference. And I think just in general, the three of you, I can't say dynamic duo, there's three of you, have just done an absolutely wonderful job, and you have a very calming and forward-thinking way, and it's very much appreciated in the district.
Thank you very much. One of the nice things about working with people like Matt and Amy and others is our focus is on students and what is in the best need of students, but also supporting our staff to the greatest extent possible. And it doesn't necessarily happen in all school districts. And I think we have a great core team here, our leadership team, and we have excellent staff in the buildings. So let me just say also, and I don't mean to interrupt the questions, but I'm always impressed with the work that every one of you puts into this, the sincerity with which you conduct the meetings in your various and respective liaison groups, and how well you represent not only students and staff in the school district, but the taxpayers of Merrimack. And you have done just an outstanding job, and I compliment you for that.
How many times have we been admonished to be the change? If not us, who? If not now, when? I've lived here a very long time, and I've seen the town eclipsed many times over. And we are, I believe, on the cusp of another cultural change in the community. And I believe that we are up to trying to meet that challenge. I want to thank everybody for coming forward this evening, and to salute our superintendency.
Well, I'm going to assume, I hope, you include these two great people
Absolutely.
in those comments. That's right.
You take a bow, you deserve it.
No, we all work together very well. You know, we enjoy coming to work each day. We enjoy We enjoy making great things happen for our students.
Thank you very much. And we now come to public participation. Is there anybody from the public that would like to come before the committee and engage us in some questions, reflections, or comments? Seeing none, I will move on to member comments. Naomi.
Don't pack up just yet. I'd like to make a motion. I would like to move that this committee adopt a policy specifying that attendance at posted budget committee meetings be defined as in-person attendance, not remote participation, and that this policy come into effect the first day, let me say that correctly, the day before the start of this year's candidacy filing period.
Do we have a second?
I'll second that motion.
Would you like to speak to your motion?
I absolutely would. So the RSAs state that a public body may, but is not required to, allow one or more members of the body to participate in a meeting by electronic or other means of communication for the benefit of the public and the governing body. Over the past couple of years, we've had quite a number of members who have contributed and continued to contribute to this body in ways that include remote attendance. Their service is deeply appreciated, and the value of their participation is not in question. However, greater experience with technology and public meetings over recent years has given new perspective on when it is most helpful and when it is less helpful in terms of conducting committee business. This motion is intended to create an opportunity for members of the committee to discuss whether meetings that are a mix of remote and in-person participation are helpful or harmful to the overall process that we engage in. There are several important elements that I chose for this wording. The first is that I specified posted budget committee meetings. This is intended to restrict this to our meetings that are posted to the public, that are minuted meetings, and it is not intended to affect smaller work groups that may gather in whatever ways are necessary or important to them. I chose timing that is intended to be very specific. It would bring any resulting policy into effect at the start of the upcoming filing period. This is intended to make sure that we, all of us who are currently on the committee, can together conclude the business of this budget cycle, while allowing any affected members to make decisions regarding their future participation in time for any empty seats to be included in the upcoming election cycle. I left no exceptions. Very often when this has been talked about, it was with exceptions involved, and I intentionally omitted that. It is my opinion that we can't have it both ways. Either we permit remote participation or we do not. I am not particularly interested in becoming or being part of a body that would try to arbitrate who can or can't if their reason is one that pleases us not in terms of their coming forward. If somebody has a reason they cannot come, they can be excused. None of us are so important that we have to be here each time if we have a reasonable reason to be excused. And there are mechanisms to handle that already. Lastly, I wanted to make clear in terms of ADA, the Americans with Disabilities Act, this kind of policy does not affect that. That is a separate consideration that would be brought to bear if there are individuals who needed accommodations. This is a broader policy in terms of our general function. That is all I have to say. Shall I read it again, or was it nice and clear the first time? Yes. I move that this committee adopt a policy specifying that attendance at posted budget committee meetings be defined as in-person presence, not remote participation, and that this policy come into effect the day before the start of this year's candidacy filing period.
I just wanted to say that I think it's a sensitive subject, and I appreciate the way that you approached it. And I think that the wording there protects this entire committee and this entire season. And then, you know, going forward, that's when it would take place. So thank you for that, making sure that everybody's taken care of there.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you. And thank you, Naomi. You always have a way with words, and you're always very good with them, and I always appreciate that, so thank you. My question would be around, so attendance at posted meetings. What happens if the member might know that they would miss a majority of the posted meetings? Does that have any impact? You know, if they still filed but knew that they would miss most of the posted meetings but could still make all the subcommittee meetings?
It seems to me that somebody who knows they cannot make the meetings should be considering that when they join the body, and that a number of absences will disqualify them from the position.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
May I say something, Chuck?
Certainly.
Okay. Obviously, I'm one of the members that has mostly utilized remote participation over the last few years. And I'd just like to give you a little of the history behind how that evolved. I can argue both sides of this. I can see pros and cons to either side.
One side would be enough, Carol, really.
What? Excuse me?
I said one side would be enough.
Oh, well, okay. Anyway, several years ago, I was thinking about whether or not my continued participation, if I had to do it remotely, made sense. And part of why I'm remote is in Florida, I have a 96-year-old cousin who I'm partially taking care of. So that's one of the reasons, not to mention I do enjoy the warm weather, but that's beside the point. But anyway, so I discussed this with a handful of members of the committee at the time. And at the time, every single one said, oh, we don't have any problem with you being remote because you still fully participate, you do your liaison assignments, it's not a problem. And it's for that reason and that reason only that I ran for re-election this past year. I would not have run had I known this was going to become a controversy. So I'm not quite sure what changed between then and now, but apparently something has changed. And I don't know of anything I can do to resolve it. I mean, Jason has gotten us a new phone, I guess, and that means I now can hear everybody, which is a big help from what it used to be. And then I'm also calling in from a VoIP phone rather than my cell phone, so hopefully you can hear me better. That's about all I can do. Beyond that, I'm not quite sure why it apparently seems to be a disruption to the meeting now, but a couple of years ago when I asked everybody, it wasn't. So I just don't know quite what to make of this change.
Are you through, Carol?
Yes.
Okay. Are there any other committee comments or reflections? Well, seeing none. I've given this a great deal of thought over time. It was a practice that was carried on by the committee for any number of years. I really don't know how it got started. It just was. And now we have come to a point where we have had reason to renew our outlook on it in terms of housekeeping for the committee. And there are any number of reasons, I believe, why this is an appropriate motion for the betterment of the committee. It has nothing to do with any personal reasons whatsoever, but wholly for the operation of the committee. Each and every one of us is here under the same elected responsibilities and oath as any other. And we would like to have, I believe, full participation from everybody. Now, I'm sure that, as Carol has expressed, she believes that she has fully participated. But it's a little bit different when you're not here. Because when you are not here, you cannot hear the intonation particularly well of committee members' comments. And in fact, there are some languages that are highly dependent upon tonation for the definition of words in that particular language. I don't think that English is escaping that scrutiny. We can't see body language. We can't see gesticulations. It's very hard to determine passion as opposed to passivity. It does also require some extra effort on the part of the school district to provide these kinds of technical hookups. I'd like to reduce the work of the IT director to the extent that he doesn't need to come out to a meeting like this. And I think all in all, we would enjoy a fuller give and take if people were here in person fulfilling their obligation. Now let me speak to the obligation. Everybody here ran for this public office. In fact, even those who said, no, I was appointed, are mistaken, because they ran for that appointment and were elected by the committee to fill that role for the remainder of the year. Anybody who runs for a budget committee position knows what the responsibility is. It is a public responsibility statutorily described in the laws of New Hampshire, which we swear an oath to uphold. Yes, it's a busy world, and yes, people have things to do, but there is a higher calling for public office, and we need to hold ourselves to a higher standard that commits to the equity that we all share in a collaborative committee setting. It's not similar to many other elected positions where you are required to meet once a month for an entire year or twice a month for an entire year. We are the budget committee. We meet once in the fall, and or perhaps even twice between October and December. And then we come into January, where we have a more steady diet of necessary meetings, again, all regulated by what we have to undertake to meet the obligations of the statutes for school district meeting. And this year, we were a little shortchanged on time, given that the school board ate up a couple of opportunities, which required us to be on a very strict schedule. It's what we signed up for. It's an expectation. I think most of us, if not all of us here, are parents, and we all know that when it comes to our kids, we tend to get what we expect. The public expects us to be here. Our colleagues expect us to be here. And I think that is the proper role. It may sound a little old-fashioned, given that as of recent past few years, there's been chaos in our communities with COVID and executive orders for this, that, and the other thing that tried to provide accommodations and relief and all of that. But I believe this motion is very correctly in order to restore the good effect that full participation has, where we can face each other, where we are familiar with the residents in our community that we might daily come in contact with, particularly if you have children in school, because you meet a lot of mothers and fathers that are relating to you what their concerns or questions might be. And that's not affordable to somebody who is out of town. And so I really believe that the good effects of what we're doing here rests in securing the best outcome for the committee in fulfilling our obligations under the law to the town of Merrimack. And I support the motion. Are there any other comments, questions? Yes, Lee.
Very briefly, I belong to a business network where it requires your presence on a weekly basis. And having been in that chapter for several years now and gone through the COVID dismissal of those meetings to no longer in person but into a Zoom format, And now having been back in these meetings, I can tell you firsthand that an in-person meeting has so much more value. Seeing somebody, as you mentioned, in person is just an incredible part of the process. I'll just leave it at that. Thank you.
Are there any other comments? Seeing none, I'll call for a vote by roll call. Pat, would you call the roll?
Naomi Schoenfeld, excuse me.
Yes.
All right, we'll go the other way. Naomi Halter.
I probably should have asked this before. I'm trying to figure out what my role is on this committee because I'm here because I'm part of the school board, and I'm wondering if it's more appropriate for me to abstain because this is budget committee business as opposed to school board business.
I would advise you that you are a voting member of the budget committee. And I can't think of any particular arbitrary reason that would preclude you from voting on any matter that comes before us.
I'll vote yes.
Dan?
No.
Carol?
No.
Rachel?
Yes.
Shane?
Yes. Yes.
Gina?
Yes.
Lee?
Yes.
Chuck?
Yes.
Michelle Mackey?
Yes.
Ellen?
Yes.
Nine yes, 2 no.
The majority prevails, and I so declare it. Naomi, you have a comment.
Yes. I'd like to make sure to mention the extent to which Carol has been helpful, both in thinking through this process and in participating from her remote location in bringing this to conversation and choosing to be a part of that conversation.
Are there any other member comments to come before the committee? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
She's on the line.
You should get me off first, Chuck.
You want a roll call vote?
Oh, I was just going with the motion to adjourn. I mean, you weren't. I saw you push it back. So.
Special menu right there. I got the message. You want to end?
Yeah.
Yes.
Motion to adjourn? Shane? Second? All those in favor? Thank you very much. We will see you all again very shortly.